So parents and teachers, the biggest, scariest, most personally and socially damaging danger of cutting your children and your students loose on the internet is not the danger of sexual predators or pornography. It is that if you cut them loose without any education about it, they are not going to be able to distinguish bullshit from accurate information. And I'm starting with that because I think that is the single most important danger facing the future of the public sphere. And I also think it's one that does not require a huge amount of capital investment nor discovery of new knowledge to do something about. So I'm going to try to, in less than the 4.5 minutes remaining, tell you how I've arrived at that over the past 3.5 decades, necessarily very rapidly. I am not an academic, although I teach here and I teach at Stanford. I am not a journalist, although I teach journalists. Started out as a freelance writer, and that's how I got drawn into technology, because I heard you could use computers to write with, and in the process of becoming fascinated about what that meant, I got a strong sense that these toys of the early 1980s were going to be very important to a lot more people than the enthusiasts who were into it right at the beginning. And in the process, plugged my computer into my modem and discovered the online world in the early 1980s, and also got the sense that this would be very important. So I did the kind of detective work that I encourage my daughter and my students to do to figure out what's going on here. Provoked by Kevin Kelly, I wrote an article in 1987 in the Whole Earth Review on virtual communities. It was an enthusiastic article. I was and remain enthusiastic, and I think because of that article I am characterized by a lot of people as being an optimist, which I am not. I find it difficult to believe how anyone could end up being educated and remain optimistic. I am hopeful. It is a choice that I've made, and I think there's all kinds of evidence for hope sitting at this table. The existence of the web itself, the tragedy of the commons, the whole theory of collective action, which of course I've come across since then, trying to figure out what's going on, will tell you that the web shouldn't exist, that Wikipedia shouldn't exist, and that Craigslist should not function. Clearly, people are able to do things together to build public goods that they're not supposed to be able to do. However, my fear, I think for this student and this child who's cut loose, it's both an individual fear that they're not going to be equipped to deal with a world in which authority is no longer to be taken for granted because it's in a text. And shame on you teachers who don't allow your students to use Wikipedia. It's the place to start studying what has happened to the authority of the text and how it's up to you to determine the accuracy of that information. So I wrote this article in 1987. It took me 4 years to convince a publisher that anyone but electrical engineers would be interested in using computers to communicate with. When I was writing the book that came out in 1992, The Virtual Community, the question that I asked myself was, what's the most important thing about where this all might go? And I think the most important question is, what effect will it have on individual liberties? There are a lot of places in the world where the state can come and take you away and not tell your people where they've taken you, and you don't know what the charges are, and they can torture you, and you can be executed, and all kinds of things that our Constitution is supposed to protect us from. That's what led me to this notion of the public sphere and to Habermas, who I admit I found almost totally unreadable. But the ideas that he presented in the public sphere made a great deal of sense to me in terms of that's what's happening here. The public sphere is happening online. There have been a lot of, and I actually last year asked Habermas about the public sphere and the internet, and I assure you he knows nothing about the internet. And one clue about that was that he wasn't so sure that the kind of rational critical discourse that's important to his theory was going to take place in internet chat rooms. That's always a signal to me that it's like someone who what they know of Lithuania is what they've read in Wikipedia. They actually have never been there. There is a little bit more going on besides chat rooms in the internet, and this is really not a criticism of Habermas. I think it's time for us to move this discussion of the public sphere into the present era. And my fear is we do have Wikipedia, we have the web, we have all kinds of wonderful virtual communities out there. We are also inundated by spam, misinformation, disinformation, porn spam, hoaxes, urban legends. The tragedy of the commons, actually, Elinor Ostrom, who got the Nobel recently, pointed out that it's actually not true that humans will always despoil commons. There are many instances in which they are able to create institutions for collective action. Wikipedia and Craigslist have done that very well. It doesn't just happen. People need to know something about it. I don't see that education is happening. So my last book, Smart Mobs, was about seeing that the technology that we have today is lowering the barriers for collective action of all kinds. This is not necessarily always a good thing, and it's not necessarily always a bad thing, and I think that the future of smart mobs and that kind of mediated collective action will depend a great deal on what people know about what its limits and dangers and powers are, and the difference between a demonstration and a movement. These things are not rocket science, and not even algebra. It's not even as hard as learning the multiplication tables, but nobody's really teaching it. So that's what I'm involved with, and for the foreseeable future, I'm trying to create some materials for parents, for teachers, and for students about what I think the essential literacies for surviving out there are, and for increasing the value of the commons. And that's attention, participation, collaboration, crap detection, and network literacy. I started calling it search and credibility, but I came across this phrase by Ernest Hemingway in which he said, I think what each journalist needs is an infallible internal crap detector. When my daughter was 11 years old was when Alta Vista came out. She started writing papers from it. I sat down with her and said, when you go to the library, you can be pretty sure that someone said George Washington was born in a certain year, that somebody actually checked that. To put something in a search engine, it's up to you to determine that. Find out who the author is, put the author's name through a search engine. This, again, it's not rocket science, it's not even algebra, it's not even the multiplication tables, and it's not even taught to anybody. My less optimistic side is that I don't see our institutions for education changing rapidly enough to adopt this, but my hopeful side says, well, the lore is, I think the people in this room collectively know what needs to be told to these kids, and so I'm going to create some materials, and I'm certainly not the only one who's working on that.
Thank you.